person don't record anymore, do I? Yeah, we got the YouTube. Okay, I'll call our public hearing for the members of the public. This meeting is streamed on YouTube and will be viewable during this time period and again starting at point tomorrow. It will be on the Town of Rochester YouTube page. So I'd ask everyone to stand for the pledge to the flag. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Ask the clerk to do the roll call, please.
Councilwoman Allen. Councilwoman Hagen DePew.
Here.
Councilman Hewitt.
Here.
Absent. Supervisor Bailey.
Here. Okay, the first item on our agenda tonight is a public hearing for local law number 3 of 2021, which is an amendment to chapter 40 zoning. It was previously known as local law number 2. We have adopted another law in the interim, so it has moved now to 3. Notice is hereby given that pursuant to town law, the town of Rochester has scheduled a public hearing regarding proposal law number 3 of 2021, amending chapter 140 short-term rentals for 12/2021 at 6:30 p.m. at Harold Lipton Community Center, 15 Tobacco Road, Accord 404. Public comment may be made in person or be written by email or letter and received to the town clerk prior to 3:30 today. We have not done seeker yet. Should we do seeker before open the public hearing or? Okay. I'll open the public hearing then and we will do seeker later. So, so we will recognize one who wishes to speak. A couple sort of short public comment and public hearing is not intended to be a question and answer session or a dialogue back and forth. The opportunity for the public to speak regarding this local law. And this is also our 3rd public hearing on this local, actually probably our 4th if we date back to 2017 when the first one took place. So we are working to hone down the changes that have been made. So with that, I'll open it up to anyone from the public who wishes to speak. If you raise your hand and we'll recognize you. Yes. Sorry, I just see a hand in the back, but.
That's all right. So I've been at almost every one of the Zoom meetings or the YouTube meetings. And I understand that tiny houses, Airstreams, and RVs have been taken off the table for various reasons. From my understanding, the main reason was that they were deemed unsafe for occupying. However, we have a Roundout Valley Resort who has people occupy them, some of them year-round. Our neighbors take their RV across the United States and occupy them, as do a lot of Americans. We had one that was hooked up to our septic system, and we had a guy pump it every week. I mean, I think there are ways to mitigate worrying about sewage and stuff like that. There's ways for people to prove that they have carbon dioxide detectors, carbon monoxide detectors, fire safety equipment in their RVs. People live in RVs a year that are snowbirds. If you want everybody into one category, I'm really not understanding it. To be told that it was because the county decided, then I would like an explanation of how there's an RV park in our town. I wasn't able to get onto the phone calls each time. So I've been holding my breath until I got here.
What we'll do is we'll take all the comments, and then if anybody from the board wants to respond, we will do that. Does anyone else wish to speak? Yes, ma'am. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you
She's
were,
doing her glasses.
I apologize. I thought you were raising your hand. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak tonight? Yes.
Yeah, just generally just kind of going through the proposed law for the first time. I mean, notwithstanding the lady's concern about what kinds of structures are going to be included and excluded. I mean, I generally think you guys made enough, the grandfathering, I think, is a good thing for people who have been operating the SDRs for a while. Just getting compliance with fire code and the annual inspection, I think is a good thing. It seems to me you generally come up with the thing that everybody can agree with together, notwithstanding this lady's concerns, but just as written, as an operator of an SDR here, I support it.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? Yes, ma'am, in the back.
Yeah, I have a slight comment. I haven't quite kept up on everything, so I don't know where everything's at. But in terms of the camping structures and these off-grid structures, I personally think that it's a definite right of some of the people who own lots of land, such as the forests and farmland and fields, to do something that isn't invasive in order to take advantage of what's going on in the community, because it's coming and it's here and it happened. And that's a whole nother discussion. But I think it's their right to try to protect that, because beyond that, the next step is to sell out and get on the bandwagon, make some money. And then what happens? Our forests are cut down, our farms are gone. Other people come in and buy up our land and tear things up. And once forests are gone, they're not coming back. So I think it's a beautiful thing, instead of having these TikTok houses, one after the other, and developments and everything. I think it's a beautiful idea. And, I understand why people are coming to this area. They have for a long time. But I think something that everyone should think about is that they're coming here for the exact reason that we're here. We love it and it's beautiful. But they are in the process changing every bit of why we love why we're here. And it's also ruining it. The thing is, they get to move on. They'll just go further north or somewhere more rural, but this is our home. And if we don't do something about it now, such as throwing a tent up on 100 acres of woods, that helps to pay for the taxes versus selling it out or having it go under, I think it's a beautiful option. And it's a way to share it for the people that want to visit it briefly and then leave. So I have a lot more to say, but I won't.
Oh, I'm gonna piggyback off her.
Let's let everyone else speak first before, and then if anyone else, does anyone else wish to speak? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm trying to figure out if we've been paying tax to Ulster County already, are we grandfathered into this? Because it was supposed to be a limited amount of permits given or something to that effect, so I'm not sure.
See if there's any other comments, and I will answer your question. So, yes, ma'am.
No, I have a real comment, not just glasses. So I agree with the previous comment that I think that I'm Megan Redwhite, I live on Chitlin Hollow in Carhomson, and I think that there's a lot of things that I heard from different people that have been taken into consideration in the law. I think there's a lot of things that make a ton of sense to me. So I have two itty bitty comments at this point, which is, I know somebody also mentioned something to me about the septic inspection, just how, like, is that a blue dye test or does that need a scope, and just how hard it is to get inspectors or people to certify things. That is a very minor point, but it's just going to be kind of a pain. And I would like to also just stress that I agree that, like, if the, like, things like tenter and things that are covered under the campground policies or that we think are covered under the campground policies are excluded from this, then I would just make a plea to the board to look at the campground regulations pretty quickly so that they can make sense, like one, because it's usually one tent and not a bunch of them. So yeah, but I think it looks, as you know, I don't have a short-term rental right now, but I certainly work with a lot of basic clients who do, and I think this is gonna be with a lot more stability. How you transfer it is always gonna be difficult when a house gets sold. And there's not any town that's found a good way to figure it out, so.
Thank you. Any other comments? Yes, ma'am.
It's more of a question, I don't know if you can read all the details, but how are you determining how many permits are allocated?
Okay, I'll see if there's any more comments, and then I'll give a quick explanation of the process once we're done here, so. Does anyone else wish to speak?
Mhm.
Yes, ma'am, we'll come back to you now, thank you. Yeah,
All right,
go ahead, I think
so I know I've told you this already before on Zoom. Because of my tiny house or RV or whatever you want to call it, the septic guy, Hudson Valley Septic, he comes once a week to pump me out. So him and his kid have a job, and because of that, he's done all my houses. And everybody that comes to our property learns about farming. We have a small farm. They come from the city, they find out how to farm, they find out how to butcher a chicken. I mean, it's like they're learning stuff, and they're going to all the local restaurants, and we're sharing real life farm experience. And a lot of people that have come to our camper are now buying houses in our area. And I feel just because we can't afford to put an accessory apartment onto our house, that we're being penalized. And I know at one point the board did say something about making some sort of smaller campground allotment. And I'd like to know if it is being considered and what the land requirement will be for that.
Okay. Are there any other comments? And then I'll answer some of the questions that have come out.
Just to follow up on that, I mean, you could, pass the laws being proposed tonight and then revisit the definitions of, what's allowable, what's acceptable, according to, other ideas of, like this lady has or whatever else. That doesn't preclude you from passing what's on the table tonight. I think that's probably a valid issue, valid concern, and something that we'll maybe visit, at a future time to amend.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, so in response to that, and sir, you just gave me a great segue, thank you. The board intends, we currently have a campground law. Your question about how can the Rondout Valley Campground operate, that is how they operate. It is not that we said that they are unsafe, it's that they are a different inspection system than a permanent dwelling unit. The board feels that there is an opportunity right now to apply as a campground. We do intend to revisit, and the gentleman who is in the management of Tenter has contacted me. We have started a dialogue. He has offered his services to help us craft a type of law that would allow for a smaller type of campground. The key behind this law is safety. And by commingling them, the county did recommend and the local planning board recommended, we had considered it at one time, and they recommended keeping the two separate. So the short answer is yes, we plan to look into it. We plan to figure out how to make it work on a smaller level than the full-size campground. But someone, whether you have one camper or 100 campers, you can apply as a campground under the current law right now. So you could do that. We intend to make it a simpler, easier process for the smaller scale. But our goal was to get this accomplished first and get this in place. This has taken long, anticipated for a number of reasons. One is we really want to hear everybody's comments and get it right. And I believe we have gotten this right. When it was at the last county planning board meeting, they are now sort of presenting this as a model for other towns who don't have one yet. So, and so The short answer is, we plan to do something. I just don't know, the answer to your question about acreage, I don't know that answer. Regarding the grandfathering process, excuse me, we will be open for permit applications from September 1st or the date that this gets officially filed with New York State, which might be slightly later than September 1st. What will happen is, as soon as it's adopted, the town clerk will file it with New York State. Once we get back confirmation it's filed with New York State, it becomes effective that day. So it will either be September 1st or whatever day we get notice it's been filed with New York State. From that point until December 31st, we will accept applications of people who are currently operating. They will then they must meet 3 criteria. One is they have to fill out an application in completeness, pay the fee. They will have to show us proof that they have registered with Ulster County for the quote unquote bed tax. Even if that means, even if you are going through Airbnb, you need to still register with Ulster County. You don't have to pay Ulster County because Airbnb is paying on your behalf. But I'm told from the county, you still should register with them so they have a recognition of your property. And then the third thing is we'll have to get an inspection for a health and safety for a public occupancy inspection, which every business that has the public coming into it must get one. There's varying degrees based on your type of business. I know people will say this is not a business, but when you are allowing the public into your home, we must treat it as a business. So from a health and safety standpoint. So that period of time, those people will apply. As long as you meet those criteria, you will be grandfathered in, you will be allowed to continue. Anybody who wants to operate a new one they can apply now, but we will not start their process until January 10th, I think it was. Do you remember?
First
Yeah.
Thursday.
It was the first Thursday. I don't remember exactly, but we will start that process for any new applications. There will be a cap on new non-owner occupied. We don't know what that cap will be yet. We're still waiting to see what the numbers are from the grandfathered. But the cap will be on non-owner occupied facilities. So if it is owner occupied, and owner occupied is defined as that you are there 180 days out of the year. So we have tried to respect the people who say, look, I live here a few months out of the year and then I go away. We've tried to respect that. So hopefully that answers your question. And I apologize. I believe you had a different question. Okay, I may have confused myself. I'm sorry. With that being said, I'd like to read these 3 letters that we received here. This letter was received June 3rd. The letters regarding the proposed law about short-term rental business activities in the town. I support the law and think it is reasonable, well-balanced in considering interests of more than just one population group in the area and of the town itself. It respects financial interests of those who live here full or part-time. The law is not unique to the town and is aimed at avoiding real estate market frenzy conditions that would lead for the local, especially young residents desiring to remain in the area and starting family here, no other option than leaving or perhaps into prefab house parks. However, I'm not sure how affordable that option is now or would be then. The concerns about the worsening labor market in the area expressed by those who oppose the law are not warranted. It is hardly hard to find carpenters, good plumbers, house cleaning.
It's already hard. You said it's hardly hard.
Oh, I'm sorry. It is already hard. Thank you. Already hard to find carpenters, good plumbers, housekeeping, cleaning, and yard workers in the area. More outside money for those services would inflate that labor market if it were not already the case. I argue the board members to approve the law respectfully, Zori Pinsky. And this, it's a very small font. It says, I briefly looked, this is the email that went with that letter. Got it. This one, I submitted comments on 4/6/21 and 6/3/21 regarding the SDR law enactment. I'm very pleased with the direction that the most recent revisions have taken. However, I still have two major concerns. Please strongly consider removing or revising the following portions of the law. My first concern is in regard to no campfires during burn bans. This is referenced at house rules. All short-term rental properties shall post for renters of each dwelling unit a listing of house rules. House rules shall incorporate but not be limited to the following. And then letter E, property owner, specifically outdoor fires shall be made solely within a fireplace or fire pit. No outdoor fire shall be allowed during New York State designated no burn periods. This statement and rule actually go against the rules listed on the burn ban page. The information on the burn ban on March 9, 2021, published burn ban press release on the DEP NewYork.gov website stating New York first enacted strict regulations on open burning in 2009 to help prevent wildfires and reduce air pollution. The regulations allow residential brush fires in towns with fewer than 20,000 residents during most of the year, but prohibit such burning in spring when most wildfires occur. Campfires using charcoal or untreated wood are allowed, but people should never leave these fires unattended and must extinguish them. I have a designated fire pit and guests really consider this as part of the outdoor experience of the property. We keep the area free of brush and debris, provide a fire tamper lid and tending supplies, and have an outdoor extinguisher. Controlled campfires should be allowed in designated areas, even during burn ban season, as disallowing them will negatively impact the guest experience and be difficult to control and regulate since it is not disallowed by the statewide burn ban. My second concern is in regard to the septic inspection and the difficulty and cost associated with getting an inspection. This is referenced at section P. The initial permit application shall include the following: water and septic. The source of the water supply shall be stated on the application and permit. The septic system shall be functioning, and the type, size, and location of the septic system shall also be stated on the application. New permit applications shall require documentation from the Ulster County Health Department, a licensed engineer, or a New York State licensed home inspector indicating that the septic system has been inspected and is found to be currently working properly. I spoke with Mike Baden on 8/11 to state with the way this is written. In the previous discussion during the Zoom hearing meeting held in March, Valeria, do you know how to pronounce her last name? Georgiou, thank you. Mentioned she had tried to contact the health department and engineers regarding the septic documentation or inspection. The health department is not able to provide a service for existing properties. Lisa Jurnow sent in comments also asking for further clarification after contacting her septic company, and they are not familiar with what type of inspection you would require. When my home inspection was done, my New York State licensed inspector was not qualified to inspect the tank. This was a service that we had to hire a septic company for. They required us to scope video the tank at a cost of $500. If a home inspector or home inspection is a qualifying document, how old could this certification be? Septic services were not listed as a source for this inspection, but it seems that they are also unclear on what type of inspection they would need to do. If a septic service could be used, would we need to have our system pumped? Would we need to have our video system inspected? If my tank was pumped recently and no problems were found, how long would be allowable from the most recent service? What documentation would be required? Simply a receipt of service. I reached out to my septic service company to see how long they keep records, but I was not able to reach them. These services had an additional $200 to $500 to the application process, making this process more unattainable for those who are not full-time hosts and are simply looking to sporadically supplement their income. In my own experience in getting my septic system serviced nearly a year ago, my service appointment was pushed back 2 to 3 times so the company could deal with emergency service calls. I do not understand how the handful of local septic companies could handle and schedule the increased appointment workload. Additionally, no one is clear as to what service needs to be performed. A septic inspection is unnecessary, cost prohibitive, and only adds to the drawn-out application timetable. If a septic overflow is an issue, the review process by guests on the Airbnb platform, along with neighborhood complaints, should keep the town informed of the issue. I would encourage the board to consider the septic clause in addition to a later version of the law, once it can be properly defined and executed. The enforcement departments need to call the health department engineers and local septic companies to find out what services are offered before expecting the STR owners to inquire about services that are unavailable. Additionally, if this becomes a problem, perhaps add this clause in a later version of the law. I would strongly encourage you to get a that is feasible and enforceable for the current staff the town has on board. And signed Emily Tillery and Justin Johnson. And then finally, third letter that was received. I was just advised of the pending proposal to regulate short-term rentals currently under consideration by the town of Rochester. As I don't think I'll be available for the hearing, though I will try to make, I write to express my opposition to the proposal. By way of background, I purchased my home in Kerhonkson in January 2019. Because my job is in the city, I split my time between the city and Kerhonkson, though I try to make it up as often as I can. Since it's often the case that I'm unable to make it up during a given weekend, I began mainly during the pandemic to make my house available on Airbnb. In this way, I'm able to monetize the house during long stretches when it wouldn't otherwise be used, and visitors are able to enjoy the house and the surrounding area. My house is set back far from the road, and I've never had any noise complaints or issues with guests. The one complaint that's been raised in the past couple of months is that the guests do generate more garbage than would be the case if the house were empty. And there have been times recently that bears have broken into the trash bins. I've changed services to resolve the issue and don't anticipate being a problem going forward. Setting aside that, so far as I can tell, my experience with Airbnb has been a net positive for everyone involved, including for guests who have enjoyed their stays, local businesses who have been patronized, the governments to which I paid taxes on the Airbnb income, the cleaners and others who I pay to maintain the property, and more. The proposal under consideration strikes me as a solution being offered up to a non-existent problem. I understand that there is a sentiment among some against people from the city and perceived outsiders more generally, but I just cannot see how the requirements and restrictions set forth in the proposal are calibrated towards a legitimate objective in anything resembling a reasonable and targeted way. I sincerely hope that the proposal will be rejected, and it's signed by Robert. And Kate, you had another, or B,
I
you
have
want to read it?
I would, to be read at public hearing and entered into the 8/12/2021 SGR public hearing minutes. I have three concerns regarding local law 3 of 2021, short-term transient rentals. Because the town of Rochester is rural and does not have a public water supply, I believe that the well on the property should be identified, perhaps inspected, and the water supply be tested upon initial application for an STR. If the STR continues to be available, periodic water testing should be done. Number 2, it appears that this law falls heavily on the shoulders of one person, the code enforcement officer. I believe the planning board should be the first in line to address the application and any renewal. The code enforcement officer can then carry on with all code stipulations. Number 3, for the well-being of the surrounding community, upon each renewal, the New York State Troopers, the Sheriff's Department, and local constables should be asked to supply the town board and/or code enforcement officer with information pertinent to the STR. This is an additional protection for the owner, the tenant, and the surrounding community. Only relying on written complaints to the code enforcement officer may not be adequate. Being a retired nurse and owner of an unhosted bed and breakfast in Kingston for 24 years, I believe these points are pertinent to the health and safety of everyone involved. Respectfully submitted, Ruth Bendelius.
You You have a copy of that?
Yeah.
Okay,
If not, you can have that.
okay. How does the board feel? Do you want to consider, if we make changes tonight, if they're small changes, something like,
Well, depends if it's a, well,
you'll
if
tell
you're
us,
making a correction on something,
okay,
that's not substantive. If you're making something that's gonna change the rules of how this
okay. So if we,
go about, then it's substantive.
well,
So you
why don't we
can-
get into it and then you'll tell us what we can and can't do.
Mike, I wondered, did we answer the question, how many permits?
Well, yes, we did, because the grandfathered is unlimited.
Okay, right.
Anyone who is currently operating. Also unlimited is owner occupied number of permits. The cap will only be on non-owner occupied new permits. So existing will be no cap, and in future owner occupied will be no cap. The cap will only be on non-owner occupied.
But we don't know how many, oh.
Number is, yeah.
So we don't know the number
We don't
yet
know
because
how many are. in
we're gonna see
operation.
how many we get with the grandfather. And then in January of 2022, we will establish a number for new permits based on the number of grandfather there.
Do you have, what's kind of like the general ethos that you'll be considering that?
The number that was being kicked around originally was somewhere between 1% to 3% of our total number of housing units, which is about 4,000. So somewhere between 40 and 120. But we really want to get a feel. We really don't have a good idea of, we think we know, but we find more and more and more of already existing. So we want to wrap our hands around the existing ones, address those people first, and then move forward with a cap based on the total number. It will be, it won't be none, I can say that. We don't really know what that number will be though for future.
It sounds like there might be a big problem with grandfathering if there isn't a proper septic inspection that can be done.
Well, the board will, what I'd like to ask the board is, start with on the house rules E. Obviously, we're saying no outdoor fires can be allowed during New York State designated burn periods. That's been brought to our attention that that's illegal. So,
Well, it's not
It's not illegal.
You can also
okay,
pass-
okay.
They're saying it's not.
So-
What I would propose is we strike that sentence, which was added at the request of our planning board, but we say, if allowed by the property owners, specify outdoor fire shall be made solely with a fireplace or fire pit in accordance with state burn rules.
Yeah, the burn ban, specifically talks about size and duration of a fire inside of 3 feet. It also says that it can be celebratory in nature.
So if we change
Can't be a
to
brush
in
fire.
accordance with New York State burning regulations, is
You're
that
making a change. Right now, you're banning them.
okay?
That's.
Well, and if that's,
So, what you may want to do, if you want to move forward on some of these things, you're also doing a general review coming up of zoning.
mhm,
This will be a new zoning chapter.
okay,
That burn ban is in March. Unless something
Yeah.
crazy happens and be.
fair enough, and we can always amend that section later.
To
Okay,
do that.
okay. I'll get back to you. I want to just discuss these couple that were brought up to the board first. And then regarding the septic, if we added another, it's pointed out to me that a septic company is also an agency that does these inspections. Admittedly, according to the letter, it's hard to schedule them, but they do. If we were to add that into the list, is that a substantial change or?
No, I mean, not substantial, they're making a correction to something that's.
Like a
numbered
typo,
wrong, or a spelling error.
Okay. Okay,
I mean, that's. I wish I could help you.
Could we accept, is there some way we could change this to accept a document that said on July 21st, 2021, we had our septic pumped out?
Well,
bill or
But that's
documentation?
all,
Mary Lou was saying that
Yeah.
any of those changes would then,
they
Cause
change your
this.
permit process.
right.
Uh-huh.
But so the question is, changes like that, do they warrant re-referral back to the county planning board? Or could we potentially make changes like that, re-advertise and then hold it?
Actually, you could probably make it things like that, you can't vote on it tonight,
Okay,
because that's a substantial change and you need it on your desk.
we need it 8 days prior
Right, I
to
don't
us
think it's
voting,
substantial enough that you have to re-refer it.
or schedule a new public hearing. Yeah.
No, because it's in response to comments. at the
Okay.
public hearing.
Like, I would just say though, this is one person's opinion. I have another person's opinion that said, a short-term rental, tenant of theirs, contacted the Board of Health over a possible septic leak. The Board of Health was, quickly responded to it. And person's septic company that they used recently was on site within a couple of days. So again, I know of somebody firsthand who has experienced exactly contrary to what this letter is saying.
Well, responding,
Emergency is different.
please, hang on. The board is talking right now. Please respect us. Thank you. The difference is a leak is a health emergency as opposed to asking them to come certify a system. I don't disagree that the Board of Health doesn't certify, but if it was recently installed, they have the record that they have
And that's
inspected it.
One of the options.
It's one of the options, yeah.
That's why I was wondering,
Yeah.
like I said.
Well, and isn't the way, I thought we talked about it before, isn't the indication, up, aren't those requirements up to the discretion of the code enforcement officer? Because we're not requiring a specific inspection, we're just saying we want someone from one of those agencies to say that they believe that the septic is working properly.
Well, it is saying it has to be one of those three, though.
Well, if you're looking to change it and not have to refer back, you could change it to or such other method as is deemed acceptable.
By the
by
code
the code
enforcement officer.
Or could you change the new permit application may require?
No, I think it still should say shall, but
Okay.
if we put it up to the code enforcement officer, because ultimately on every building permit and every remodel and everything else, ultimately, he has to look at it and say, yes, it's acceptable, or no, it's not. Normally, on a new construction, he says, I want to see Board of Health approved. And that's why we said Board of Health, but we also extended it to licensed engineer or a licensed home inspector. Now, I know from my home inspection, some home inspectors do septic, some don't. And they will do a camera test to identify. The reasoning behind this is septic systems are based on the number of bedrooms. And we are allowing sleeping areas to be non-bedroom spaces. So potentially you could have more users of the system than the system was designed for. And that is the reason of having a baseline of making sure it's functioning properly before. Maybe we could say if the occupancy is greater than the number of bedrooms, because that's really the reason for it, is if your occupancy was the number of bedrooms, then you'd be fine. And I know we're talking about changes, but if we only and then wait 8 days to vote on it, and then we could vote on it, it would delay it slightly, but it would not delay it by a month.
It's also to prevent pollution of waterways. That's the other reason. why we put that in.
Yeah.
But I think it makes a great point that if people are spending $500 for the test, then the application process is unaffordable. And that's not our intention.
No, that is not our intention.
But I like your add-on about qualified professional.
It's not our intention to make it unaffordable. However, people are gaining revenue, and of several $100s based on the number of nights, the prices we have seen is a few nights stay. And I'm not just not, it is a business. It's not it's no longer a residential use. It's a residential / business use is what it is. So, I mean, I understand that we want to make it affordable, but it also, if there is a cost to doing business, there's a cost to doing business, so. But what does the board feel like? If you want to make these changes, we could vote on it at our workshop meeting and it would delay us slightly, but we would have it in place by sometime mid-September. It would just put us a month, 3 weeks behind.
You're gonna have to change the end date then of the.
No, because it
grandfather?
says September 1st or upon filing with the,
Okay,
Yeah, I mean,
Mary Lou already had us add that.
no, I know
language.
she did.
What
mean,
date is your
just short
order
meeting.
meeting?
2 weeks from today,
26th,
14 days.
so the 26th,
I could get changes to people by tomorrow.
right, and I'm just saying, it is on the, it's not the date you receive notice that it's filed, it's on the date it's filed, and you can look that up on the
Right.
Secretary of State's website.
Yep.
So if it's overnighted to them on Friday, they'll have it Monday, and Monday or Tuesday, they'll have it
Yep.
filed.
Yeah.
So it's a couple days.
Okay.
But what changes are we talking about? Because I
So the two
feel pretty
changes
strongly that we want to have.
So
a
the one
function.
change I'm talking about is back on the house rules. What I would propose is we say, we remove the last sentence, say no outdoor fire shall be allowed. And we say if allowed by the property owner, specify outdoor fires shall be made solely within a fireplace or fire pit in accordance with New York State
Yeah,
burning regulations.
I agree with that one. Yeah.
So that's one change. Should I do a motion on each change as we go, or should I just poll the board?
You're discussing it. I think that
Okay.
everybody said, all right,
Okay.
I don't think you need a motion.
Is
on it.
everybody okay with that wording on that
Yes.
change?
Yes.
And that will correct that problem. Okay. We had a couple people who wanted to say something before we make the wording change on the last. Is the board okay if I? ask-
Public hearing still open.
Yeah,
Yes.
so, okay. So, yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I guess I'm a little bit confused about the septic issue. From my understanding, what this process is to encourage people who are running short-term rentals to register, so the town or the county receives its revenue. Is that correct?
No, this is not about
No,
revenue.
it's
This
not
is about health and safety. There will be revenue to pay the costs of operating the program, but it's not about revenue.
But if somebody has a septic system that is not operating properly, they're gonna be out of business. So this inspection thing seems a little bit ambitious, because I know from our own experience, trying to get somebody in to deal with a septic issue in an emergency even, we had to call, what, 3 or 4 people to finally get somebody out to our residents. So if we're talking about doing an inspection on a septic system for a short-term rental, it's pretty impossible in our experience to get somebody out there quickly. So if our septic is not working, we can't host people. We can't even go to the bathroom ourselves on the property. So I think that there's a disconnect between the homeowner and the host. And if they're not able to operate, then this is all a moot point. I mean, I don't know if I'm making sense with what I'm saying. I'm hearing in the background.
Let me allow other people to speak, and then I don't want it to become a back and forth, so, but there is another point to consider, so. Yes, ma'am.
I had a super small point for the fireplace thing. So it's fireplace, fire pit. What about a chimney? I feel like a lot of people have chimeneas. I don't know if I'm splitting hairs here. If you would want to add that, does it count as one of those, or a chimney?
If it's outdoor, it still falls under those, I believe, it would.
Perfect. I would read it and I would think immediately, I have to throw up my hand tonight, but the septic system also, Hank Polly from Apple Valley Inspections, who's great, is a septic engineer, and he can talk about, he can talk about these things, but usually it is true that when you have a problem, it backs up into your house, or it immediately goes in the yard. I kind of think it's sort of a pretty smart idea to think about it in terms of if you're gonna have occupancy in places other than the bedrooms. Because the same thing, if you have 50 people over for a big birthday party, your septic's gonna overflow, and that just happens. It's part of living with the septic. It's not a failure of the septic system. So I think that if people were, I kind of think it may be an owner occupied thing, because then if someone just wants to be able to rent their short-term rental when they go away for the holidays, then to have to pay $500 to have a special septic inspection does seem even more onerous than if they, I don't know, it does feel like there's something a little bit off on that one. But for the real estate, what we normally do, we do take we have clients to have proof of having it pumped within the past 2 years, because they do a visual inspection
I didn't.
when they pump it, which most inspectors would say it's better than the blue dye test. Sorry. that's a little
Thank you for your point. Anyone else wish to speak? Yes, ma'am. Okay. The general consensus and what I have heard in the discussion about the issue with septic is if that a system is already taxed and then it is used in a greater degree than it was designed for, the problem is not in the failure that the home can't use it anymore. The problem is in the failure of when it runs downhill into neighbors' water supplies, into neighbors, into streams, into other areas. We've all seen examples of a failed septic system, and quite frankly, it proves that gravity works. So,
And it's not, I understand that you can't use your septic if you may not want to use your septic if that's happening. We're trying to prevent that from happening.
right. But I think the idea of saying what Mary Lou suggested of or other acceptable proof it. You'll have to say it again to me.
Yeah, because that opens up the, if somebody wants to just have it pumped, great. If they want to do a dye test, great. If they want to get an engineer, great.
Yeah,
We give them maximum flexibility, but the bottom line, we want a working septic.
Originally, we had put having it pumped within 2 years. and
within
I
2
think
years
there
was the original,
Yeah.
and we were told that 5 years is the norm now for most homes. So we struck that out.
I think originally you had that it was going to be done in the future as well, didn't you? Not
We
just
had it
in
on
the
like a
application.
site.
We did with
that-
we had it with every renewal as
Right,
well, and we
and then
eliminated
you took
that.
that
So
off,
this is
yeah.
just on an initial application to establish a baseline. If the board is willing to, I'm willing to go along with just allowing our code enforcement officer the ability to determine that he thinks it's acceptable. Maybe we even take out the examples and we just say shall require documentation provided to the code enforcement officer that the septic system
Is adequate.
is adequate and found to be currently working properly.
We can even have the application say, do you have a functioning septic system? And have you had a recent overflow? If yes, explain. Because I think Megan has a good point. Sometimes 50 people came and it's a unique situation.
Right, but if you're gonna have more people using the septic now, like I was saying, because
Consistent.
it's set for a 4-bedroom house, but now we're gonna use the bonus room or the den or something as a sleeping area.
Right.
I mean,
Then that's like
we all
is
see
adequate for
these
6.
homes that are advertised, sleeps 12, sleeps this many. The average home doesn't have 12 people in it. I know some homes
Yes,
do,
yes.
but the average home does not. And so you suddenly get much more use. Now, it is a short-term use of it, understandably, but if it's an ongoing thing, there is a residual buildup.
Mhm.
Let's go with what you said, Mike.
Yeah.
I would go with. what
So
you
new permit applications shall require documentation, and we're gonna cross out from the Ulster County Health Department, a licensed engineer or New York State licensed home inspector. Indicating that the septics, we're gonna take off the has been inspected, indicating that the septic system is found to be currently working properly.
indicated to be adequate,
Adequate size
As,
adequate size for
occupancy.
the short-term rental occupancy.
adequate size for the STR
And
occupancy
adequate size and proper working condition.
well, found to be currently working properly,
Oh, yeah. okay.
adequate size for the SDR occupancy,
Yeah,
and is
the same
as determined by the code enforcement
Yeah.
officer.
And so what that
as
could,
deemed adequate. by
what
the-
that could mean is that when we collaborate with the code enforcement officer on the application, there might be some things
We might
on
be
there
able to
in
see
that
them.
section that are asked
Yeah.
for, but that'll be from what he thinks
So
he would need.
I'm going to read this back. New permit application shall require documentation indicating that the septic system is found to be currently working properly, is adequately sized for the SDR occupancy, and is or we just say and is adequately,
As is. We can work on where we're gonna put it in. You'll have it.
okay,
As,
okay. We're just basically gonna, we need to just word it to say as approved by the code
Yeah.
enforcement officer.
Right.
Or as reviewed by the code enforcement officer.
okay. New permit application shall require documentation. Acceptable, deemed acceptable by
Oh,
the code enforcement officer, and then the rest.
thank you. And that allows it to be somebody showing that they've just been pumped. It allows a lot of leeway. Indicating that the septic system is found to be currently working properly and is adequately sized for this SDR occupancy, period. Okay. We will take any more comments here and then we're gonna close the public hearing. Yes.
Sorry, adequately sized is a different test than if it's working properly. So to find out if it's
That's
adequately
why it's
sized, they
both,
have
that's
to.
why both are in there.
Yeah, so they would have to, you have to dig it, that can't be determined by pumping it. So you have to like open it up and look in the tank.
Or maybe someone knows the
Maybe
size.
somebody knows,
from-
but most of them they don't. So the test that they do is either the blue dye test where they flush a certain number of water down, then they figure out what it is, but most of the time people actually don't know how big their tanks are. So that it's just so that you know, like, so that you know that maybe what you, maybe exactly what you want, but that will require a company to come and dig it and open it.
Well,
and look at the
we're
tank.
also saying as deemed acceptable by the code enforcement officer, so it's his opinion if it's adequately sized. It's not saying it has to be proven what the size is, it's just his opinion if it's adequately sized, so.
It would seem that the size, if someone is advertising a four-bedroom house that can sleep 12, going to run into an issue where the actual septic system is for a four-bedroom house. So, no, I'm just taking your example.
Yeah,
Taking your example. And so somewhere along the line in the new application, I'm sure you're going to have to calibrate those two things. What is intended as a rental and what you actually have as a physical.
It already is addressed, the code enforcement officer views the property and determines what the maximum capacity of that property is. So he would then take the septic into consideration in determining what that occupancy would be. So it already is addressed. Somebody may say, I want it to be 12, and he may look at it and say, no, your maximum is 8. So that will address it. I think if anyone has any additional comments, otherwise, I think we've addressed the concern we've had. And if anyone has any new issues they would like to bring up, yes, sir.
How do you address the grandfathering that comes before Airbnb?
Before what? Excuse me?
Before Airbnb, properties here were built 60 years ago. You buy a house that's was built in the cities.
We have said in the code that you
Nobody
have,
knows.
we have said in the code that you have to have been operating as a short-term rental within the last 5 years to be grandfathered in. So we're not grandfathering in something prior to that. We're addressing the people that are running.
Just about the size issue. I don't, talking from my own experience, my property, I don't know what the size of what was approved. The property is not used overused. And now, what you're saying,
Should we take the
it
size
has
out?
to be measured for size, and I'm grandfathered, my septic is adequate. Okay,
How does the board feel? Should we take the size part out and just say found to be operating currently as deemed acceptable by the code enforcement
I
officer?
mean, Mike, we're having people buying up properties here that, quite honestly, some of the properties are, 60, 70, 80, 100 years old. And, again, they might have adequate systems, they might not. I don't think the average homeowner can determine the size of their septic system, and to make it a business and say, yes, I think it's okay. I think I determine, because I'm a homeowner, that this septic's big enough. We need something to say that it's adequate for the purposes that it's being served. So again, we give a lot of flexibility in there, many, many, many different ways to determine it, including, hey, listen, the code enforcement officer thinks it's big enough, then it's big enough.
Maybe the word can be changed to capacity instead of size.
but when there's no documentation, maybe you can just say, okay,
Well,
the property is operated and
It
there are no
becomes-
issues arising.
It becomes a code enforcement, but is everybody okay with changing adequately sized to adequate capacity?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
And also, I feel that we should leave this in, but laws are not written in stone, and we can always revisit it if Jerry thinks we should, or if it's,
Well, we'll hear from him if he thinks it's not working. And
but I'm saying
and-
down the line, like, I think we have really worked on this to make it as workable as possible while still trying to
Still addressing the
maintain
issue.
the issue.
Okay. There any more hands? If not, ask for a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll make that motion.
I have a second.
Second,
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained. Okay. So we've made these two changes. I'll get that new language to Katie. We'll get it circulated to all of you, and we will then vote, not tonight, but we will vote at the workshop meeting on that local law, and we will go from there. So moving forward into the seeker, thank you, everybody. We appreciate very much your comments. I've given you the copy of the part one, which is what was submitted to the initial law back last December. We have to do the part 2 and 3. So we will read through. In my opinion, they're all no. Would the board like us to these, or we all agree that they are all should be checked, no impact?
yes.
Yeah, I think we all have experience with this and have been through it, so.
It's a little different than a planning board application.
This is for the new law, the STR, right? How much do you, this is just a question I'm tossing out.
Yep.
Fire companies, do you think it would, I'm just throwing this out, and the first aid squad, either or.
It actually
any
will help
or.
both. I'm told by the fire district, they have a list of properties on their board that they get a number of fire alarm calls that are automatic alarms triggered where somebody sets it off. By having this registration, and you remember, we received one way back in the beginning,
Yes,
we
I
received
do.
a letter from
Yes,
stating that very fact, so I'm not saying something that's
No,
made up. In many ways, what this will do is give us, we will be able to provide to them the addresses of all our permits, I believe. I would think that that would be legal to give them a list of anywhere there's a short-term rental permit.
That short-term rental permit is open.
Yeah.
It's a record.
That says it for the fire company. I'm wondering
We can
about
do
the
the
first
same
aid
for the rescue
squad.
squad.
Yeah, I think they should be a little
They
bit
would
aware.
be able to do the same for both. So in answer to your question, I think it helps them.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Well, it may help the fire district from the alarms, but I'm wondering if it's going to help the first aid.
Well, if they
squads.
know too that these addresses, if they're responding
Yes.
to a call, it may help them know what they're responding to.
That's true. I agree.
So, but it's a very good point. Okay, since everybody agrees that they're all no impact, then part 3, I filled out, it's a type 1 action. We have completed part 1, 2, and 3. And so I would ask for a motion that this project will result in no significant adverse impacts on the environment. And therefore, an environmental impact statement need not be prepared. Accordingly, a negative declaration is issued.
I'll make that motion.
Second,
I'll second.
Kate, that's a roll call vote.
Councilman Allen,
Aye.
Councilman Harvey McHugh,
Aye.
Councilman Hewitt,
Hi,
Councilman Patton,
Aye.
Supervisor Lee.
Aye. And then Kate, if you would distribute that to the various EMB and everybody else that needs to get a copy of it. I think the local planning board, because they were in, they're advisory.
We don't have any.
We don't have any
Involved agencies.
involved
So it
agencies.
just has
We
to
are
go
just,
to-
that's,
Yeah.
And once we adopt the final copy,
Just-
that and the seeker goes to the county, but that's once we adopt the final one. I think you've got the template for the EMB.
Yeah.
It's on the DC's website. so. Okay. No resolution. We've done our discussion already. Wanted to give you all our budget modifications. Apologies that I didn't have this last week. I had intended to, and things just got busy. I've gone through and made proposal of changes based on our changes throughout the year. Here's a copy of both general and highway. I'm happy to walk you through the whys and of each one if you like, or if you want to just ask questions about any in particular. It's not that many. I could just easily walk us through them. So the first one, professional services, that's the appraisal. That's the additional $4,000. Public notices and advertising, that's just a result of COVID and special meetings and more advertisements than we had planned on. And also things like this referendum that we just had to put in for the 2 cell towers. I took that $500 out of education and conference because there haven't been many conferences, and there's the ones that are now free for the most part. Tim and I are going online. Tim's doing both the bookkeeping 1 in August and the bookkeeping 2 in October.
Is that online?
Yep.
What a shame. You get so much more
Yeah.
out of it if you go.
It's online, but
You do.
it's
You
a
need
3-day
to.
online though.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Karen did it last year and 3-day online.
Wow.
And I watched Karen go through. It's a full 2.5 days.
Well, we know that.
Yeah. And I'm taking the second, which I never taken. I never took the number 2. I took the one with you.
Yeah.
I never
Oh, I
took the
did.
advance.
Okay. Maybe I'll watch for that. When is that?
October sometime. Yeah. It may already have filled up. We both reserved it. You actually paid for it last month, Bill.
But I know, I saw that, but that's okay.
The change for the bookkeeper supervisor was the first change in February was made with Karen. And then the amended budget is made because if you look down at purchasing, we had split Karen into part purchasing. But we made Tim back whole. So the 880 is the amount we spent on Karen while she was here. So the balance is going to Tim. The accountant change is a request or recommendation from our from Sickler, Torchial and Churchill. Apparently, because we are not using an auditor, we are just doing an accounting company who compiles our documentation. and submits our AUD. It shouldn't fall under auditor. It always was in the supervisor budget line. I moved it to the auditor 3 years ago, and they finally got around this year, or 2 years ago. They finally got around to telling me, really that needs to be under professional services. So that's why that swap for next year's budget. What I didn't realize is every year they were moving it on their own. I just didn't realize that they were making that change.
That's why you're taking it out of order.
Taking out of auditor and moving it to supervisor. So it's just a swap. It's the same amount of money.
I got that, but,
Same budget line, just
Different code.
0.448.
but then will you put it in professional services next year?
That 440 is professional services.
Yeah.
The 8 is just the breaking it out so we know exactly what it's for.
Okay,
So the 44 is professional services. It's 440, and then we've added additional numbers depending on the service.
right.
So I just left it at the 448 that we already had it on and just moved it to the
So that's the supervisory accountant line,
under contractual.
contractual.
So just a move from one to the other. Tax collector, we had some additional office supplies. We had to purchase some envelopes this year that we didn't know we were going to need to purchase, I think, when we did the budget last year. Anyway, we spent about $500 or $600 so this year on office supplies, so I just bumped it up to $750 to get us through the end of the year. There was some miscellaneous charges. I don't remember. Remember, we don't fund the miscellaneous. We fund it at 0, and if we
Right.
need it, we fund it. The purchasing is already explained. Third deputy clerk, that was when we moved Courtney into that position, and that will fill her out for the remainder of the year. Similar office supply there. And the bank reconciliation, we're at about 1,200 right now. I know Kate will be using her services again the rest of the year. So I think actually we're about 1,100 right now. So I put it at 1,500. The engineer professional services, that was the building conditions survey, which was 5,900 and something. Records management and record supplies and materials, those are new budget lines that will be preparing for the grant. The 2,500 will be Courtney's time to do the work. The $1,000 will be the supplies of the boxes to box everything up.
Did I misunderstand you maybe when you said, before, I'm going back to that 320, 44.8, do you want under the supervisor, do you want a 0.8 or do you want a 0.440?
Now, 440 is professional services.
Yeah,
I'm going to 448, which
because that's an
specifies it
accountant.
as the accountant line. So we
Okay.
know, so the only thing that will go in that budget line is things spent on the accountant. We have
Gotcha.
other 44, probably have a 441, a 442 that are other professional services.
Mhm.
So it's a,
441, I'm just saying.
You are?
there's,
You
said
might
hope
be.
you
I
are?
try to keep them consistent with
401, Tom Seaver.
throughout the whole budget. If we create it like our supplies and materials are the same number in every budget code.
That's why I was, yeah.
So that's why I just moved the 448. I don't think there's a 445, 6, and 7 under supervisor, but if there's a
I just-
448, it does.
Yeah, I just
Yeah.
wondered how you,
It was consistency was the only
that's
reason.
what I was.
So I was moving on now to buildings. The 3 laborers there, those were the 3 employees that helped us complete the addition here and for the code enforcement office. Because they were, one was a highway, one was a code enforcement, or one was our fire inspector. And I forgot who the third one was that did a little bit of work on it. Oh, yeah, it was part-time highway. So that $1,200 there was them finishing that project this spring. We did not budget anything in those budget lines for it. We only have one position under buildings and grounds now, the .111, which is Harry's position. Supplies and materials, we're not going to spend near as much on building this year as I thought we were, so I took 1,500 out of that. Office supplies, I had to add a little bit. Our electric bill, it's gonna be tight, so I added 2,500 just to give us a little cushion. We may stay under the 20,000, but I'm not sure, so. The kerosene, diesel, and gasoline, I neglected to put a number in there. Normally, most of it falls under central garage, but there are a few things under building. If they're using gasoline for a specific project or something, or so we spent about $300 there, so I put $350 in there. The SUV, that was Jerry's new vehicle. I took some of our money that we needed out of that because that was only around 19,000. The insurance, the additional insurance for Jerry's vehicle bumped us up to like 55 something, so I added $100 there. Parts, we're doing a lot more in-house repairs and things these days, so we will not need the full amount there. The data processing, we had added a second computer in the code enforcement office there are 3 in there now. We had only originally had 2. That was $1,200 to $1,500 difference, so it took us to the 12,000. Unallocated insurance, there is $1,200 that was used by the recreation department for their insurance policy. When we got our insurance policy this year, it wasn't specifically broken out. It was all included in the main charge. So that accounts for about $1,200 to $1,500 of it. The balance, quite frankly, I think the 33,000, I think I made a mistake when I estimated, because I was over on highway by about 5,000 or 6,000, and I was under on general fund by about 9,000 in my estimates. Now, unfortunately, we can't get the money back from highway. Once we give it to them in their budget, it's theirs. But so I took it out of contingency, and we will make sure next year that I budget more realistically. I'm not quite sure what happened, why we only budgeted 33. Maybe it was a typo and I didn't catch it.
Can we, unallocated insurance falls for what? Now, is that all of, that's not the,
It's not, buildings is, I've separated out our insurance more. Vehicles are under central garage. Building insurance is under buildings. Unallocated insurance is liability. It's the professionals insurance that is on all of us for doing our work, that protects us. It's everything that is not buildings, vehicles. The special policy for the constables is separate. Remember, we did add $1,000 this year policy for cyber insurance that we did not plan on or budget for. So that is 1,000 of that is that as well. But the 43 is very close to last year's number. I just don't know why I only put in 33. So short answer is I took out of the contingency to make up the difference. The judgment claims, we knew that was going to come. That is the fire tax on the solar improvements. We are required under our contract with the solar company to pay that. The town taxes, school taxes are exempt. Fire taxes are not. So we will be having to pay that in the future. We did not budget for it because it wasn't thought of until we, as they only went into operation as of last year. So public safety and administration, this was some training for our constables. The total bill was $450, I believe. And so I had to add a little more there. The road signs, we did a few more signs this year than we had originally planned on. The signs for the community center, the signs around the town parking lot.
that encompass the no parking or they come
Yeah,
out of?
all the
highway?
no parking are in there too. The 7,000, we've spent about 5,200 right now. The 7,000 gives Jeff enough cushion for the rest of the year. Normally, we are in the range of between 4,000 to 6,000 each year on signs. And right now we're at about 52 or 53, I think. Control of our professional services for dogs, that's amount of money that we put in there. If Jill has to take them to the vet for any reason. We are really lucky in that Jill has established a not-for-profit that oftentimes pays those services, as well as she has a number of vets that do it at very reduced rates. We haven't even begun to touch the money this year. I put in the 1,750 because last year we used most of that. This year, I think we've spent about $200, if that. You guys have the financials. Well, you don't see this level of breakdown. Anyway, we're not going to need the 1,750, so I took some out of that. The same with the highway. Public notices advertising, we put $100 in there in case they ever needed to do. Was one of those just in case things. They're not doing any notices. We took that back. The postage, they don't have much postage. So the recreation director, that's just a swap from Rita's position to Bethany's position. And the office supplies, they've had a little bit more than usual. The parks is a swap. The 4,000 that was in equipment is for the mulch. It was about 2,800 to 3,000. So I moved the 4,000 into operation and maintenance because that's not really equipment, that's operation. Summer rec aid this year, because we only had 4 rec aids, we classified them all in the same position. Normally there's 2 rec aids, there's 1 counselor at the 113 line, and then the other summer counselors, it would work its way down. We only hired at Ashley's request this year 4 rec aides. They were all paid the same amount of money. So the other 3 positions were not filled this year. So I deleted all those, took the 7,200 and added it to the existing, which will more than pay for those 4 ladies for the summer. And then we gained a bit of a windfall of the others. Bear in mind that most of those are paid out of the fees that we get, which are also going to be considerably lower this year because we didn't service as many kids as we have in the past. So it's not really that we gained anything with those other 2 numbers. It's just that there's no need for them to be in the budget. Stone Ridge Library, they raised their rates on us this year to match the Marbletown budget because all the Marbletown taxpayers pay toward the library. They offer us a service for a certain number of people. I believe it's 100. So that was the cost of 100 memberships this year as opposed to the 12,500 last year. Program for the aging, that was just some miscellaneous expenses that Ashley put them in as aging. Normally we put them in adult recreation, but those were like the Mother's Day cookies and baked goods that they hand delivered around. That's what those 2 expenses paid for. Planning board has had a lot more applications, which means a lot more notices. But those are also paid for in fees. Then moving to refuse and garbage. We originally started with the idea of having a supervisor, which we no longer have. That position is empty and it's going to stay empty. So we gained a large amount there. The second line is where Davies' position has been. The 15,000 will more than adequately pay what we've paid to him. So we're gaining the 30,000 and use it to pay the other labor positions because we've only had 2 people there for quite a period of time. We've gained some revenue that was budgeted. So that's why the 7,000 less and the 4,000 more on the other one. So essentially they're kind of a wash. The printing tickets and stickers, we've had to print some more, and we will be printing. This year, we're going to make sure we have next year's stickers in place before January 1, so I've included the money in there. We're now going to go to a different printing company who will get it done for us in time compared to the other one who didn't. So we end up paying for 2 years worth of stickers this year because we didn't get the first round until January. Operation and maintenance, just some general costs have exceeded the $1,000. The $1,000 was always just sort of a placeholder. The composting, we are not getting the draw that we used to, plus using the RRA is so inexpensive that $400 even is going to be a lot. It's probably going to be like about $350, if that. But people just aren't bringing it. I'm not sure if we aren't advertising it well, if they gave up or what, but the PBZBA secretary assist, that position was the zoning secretary who was helping the building department, and that's not happening anymore. Office supplies, we had to add a little bit for code enforcement. The professional services, I have to go back and see. We did not budget anything, and there is an expenditure for it, and I have to go back and find out what that expenditure was for. But it was about $1,500 to $1,800. So I added it in there. I'm going to go back and look at the voucher and figure out what it was. Unless it was miscategorized, in which case we'll correct this 2,000. The mileage was the period of time that Jerry had to use his own vehicle while we were waiting for the new one to get registered and on the road. Postage is just, they've had more postage. The workers' comp was a slight change. It's always a guess of what our bill is going to be. And the health and medical insurance, we borrowed from that or took out of that. We have not had near the amount of use of the high deductible that we have had in past years. So we actually probably will have about 30 or 40,000 that we budgeted for health insurance that we won't need this year.
The workers' comp comes from the county. Is that self-insurance?
That's
What is that?
Yes, the workers' comp is through the county, through the self-insurance. And that was just the generalized bill. So as you can see, all the changes zero out. No changes beyond that. And moving to highway, there's some big whole changes, but most of them are labor. It's always a guess as to what people are going to do. When we used to just say it was either roads or snow plowing or brush and weeds, it was a lot easier, but now we've characterized it a little more specifically. So last year we had a lot more administration hours than we've had this year. So that's where the first two changes are. They needed a little bit in office supplies. We had not budgeted anything.
This administration has, no, I know the answer, never mind.
Okay.
Because I know who he falls under. He falls under A, that under general is Jeff, correct?
Jeff falls under general. Yeah, this is the highway workers.
Yep.
Not this, not the
I
highway
knew that, I
superintendent.
got it before
Or the secretary.
I let it out, yeah.
The professional services, these are inspections of vehicles, things like that. We've had a little bit more expense than usual this year. The engineer professional services increase was due to the Millhook Ridge Road, or the Millhook Road Bridge, excuse me. There was about $4,000 worth of expenses specifically in relation to that. And that was paid for as part of the ban that we took out. Maintenance of roads, we got more CHIPS money. So because we got more CHIPS money, we're able to do more work. That's why the higher numbers there on the pre and post is based on our contract, the employees hired prior to 2014 and the ones post 2014. The mechanic has done some work out there, as well as the seasonal guys and the laborer. Supplies and materials, they haven't really spent much on the maintenance of road supplies. The paving, Jeff did a little bit more than he had planned on. That is not CHIPS refundable, that budget line. But you will see that it's covered in other ways. The maintenance of the asphalt, I'm not sure why I separated that out because it's the same thing as the paving line. So 5 of that 35 is actually that 5. Permanent improvements those are essentially CHIPS related projects or the 150 or the 180 that we added, excuse me, 150 that we added for the bridges was for the Millhook Bridge.
That was the big.
And that was the ban, yep. Machinery, Jeff had some of his last year, some of his highway guys doing more work on machinery, helping the mechanic than he did this year, so we're low on that number this year, so I took 5,000 out of there. I remember we agonized about this, and I even remember, Chris, you like threw out a number, so let's go with this. Well, gas and diesel and kerosene prices have gone up.
Just
And
a little bit.
we're right now, we're at about 58,000 now, so I guess that 80 will get us by. Professional services on machinery, Jeff has done a little bit, some things he didn't quite plan on. The brush and weeds, that's just the manpower that he's using. Last year, he was using the post 2014 guys. This year, he's using the pre, so it's a flip-flop. They have had a fair amount of overtime, a lot of trees down this year, and they always seem to fall down at night. Or on the weekend.
Weekends and holidays.
Yeah, weekends and holidays and nights.
They did need to get some new parts for the mower that we're not planning on. That is snow removal. We're doing really well. Unfortunately, though, in the beginning of the year, most of the snowstorms were, again, on overtime situation. So I'm adding 10,000 to the overtime, but to make it up, I'm taking 25,000 out of the straight time, and we should be fine with that, with doing that. So the good news is that for snow removal, we're under what we originally budgeted. Jeff needs to get a little more sand, and he's good on salt, so we're just going to take 2,000 from the salt and put it towards sand.
I hope they balance. I hope they come in close together.
They
know what we pay for sand, but you never know what you pay for.
Yeah, they're you see now, instead of last year, the 30 and the 18 would work. This year, it's 28 and 20. He said he's going to need to get a little more sand to finish out the year. So,
well, we know what we pay for that, but it's the salt that's going to be the.
Well, we already have enough for the rest of the year for salt.
Okay,
He's
good
on that. The debt service, we paid off that ban, but in order to do that, we went from the 140 to the 240, so that's the additional 100. And then on the revenue side, we got $300,000 more in chips than we anticipated. We were guessing that it would go down, and it actually went up.
Right.
So plus the money left over from last year. And then the 250 band principal was just that new band that we took out, the 150 and the 100 equal to 250.
They allowed us to carry money forward from chips? Did I misunderstand?
No, you're allowed to carry it forward, and they did. They gave, not only did they allow us to carry forward from last year, the 20% that they took out from the third payment.
Yes,
They gave
yes.
it back to us.
I remember them giving it back, but I wondered, I was
Nope,
questioning that they let us go.
I believe it's 3 years. Don't quote me on that one. It's
I
definitely 2.
thought that if they didn't spend it, they lost it. I didn't realize.
No,
there
you're
was a
allowed a
3-year.
1-year carryover because we had spent all our.
It used to be that way.
I think they used to have this.
Yeah.
It
But
could
it
have
must have
changed in the
changed
last
it.
2 or 3
It
years.
must
I
have
don't,
changed it, but you're
Yeah.
right.
and giving us the extra 50, whatever they took.
That 20% of the third
20%,
payment.
yeah.
Plus, they increased the CHIPS funding from
Obviously.
2020 to 2021, in
Yeah.
addition
Yeah.
to the carryover. And so,
I
because it was last year when we were making the budget, we had no idea what
I
the
know.
governor's budget was, because the governor's budget comes out April 1st, and we have to do our budget October.
I know,
So
so just guess.
it's a guess.
I'd like to make a
285.
motion. The town board authorizes the town supervisor as budget officer to amend the 2021 general fund and 2021 highway fund budget as presented.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Me.
Opposed? Okay.
Had to see if anybody was awake.
Real quick, and Chris, I made copies of what you sent me.
Okay.
I'm not necessarily planning on us talking about it tonight, but Chris is proposing a phase 2 of the park. I wanted to get it to you so you could look at it now and 2 weeks from now, so we can talk about it at our workshop meeting.
Yeah, I was hoping at the workshop we could talk about it.
Perfect. So we'll just leave it at that. If you've got any questions between now and then, ask Chris.
Yeah, the main thing to point out is it comes under the budget that we set aside for this year. And he'll also be volunteering with the Hudson Valley Native Landscaping Crew, just because they have a crew that would volunteer to help them.
We have,
And yes, please reach out through email if you have questions.
And the 2020 census numbers were distributed today.
Yeah.
The county planning department put together a spreadsheet that shows a change for all towns in Ulster County from 2000 to 2020.
okay.
Copy for you too.
Oh, he talks about like pecan,
Yep.
walnut, dwarf, this is a hybrid.
Okay. Thank
One
you.
for one B.
Awesome.
Reading is fundamental and I did
So-
not before. I did this.
We basically stayed the same. We're 41 less than we were at the 2010. Bear in mind that the census numbers were as of April 1st, 2020. I think if they were later in the year,
Postcode, yeah.
post-COVID, we'd be
so
higher.
a lot of those.
Yeah.
But we are at a 0.56% change, which is one of the lower negative changes of all the towns.
How is that possible? With all the new buildings and all the new people.
Surprisingly enough, we think it's all the new buildings. There are only, from 2010 to 2020, there's only like an additional 50 or 60.
That's right, it doesn't include 21, which
New-
Right.
which is
Doesn't
gonna
include 2020.
Yeah.
affect it exponentially.
April 1st.
Yeah, April
1st,
1st.
Sort of pre-pandemic.
All
Yep.
those things last
Yep.
summer. and fall.
March 8th was when I got the phone call. So, anyway, I just wanted to share it with you. These are the numbers that the county redistricting committee will now be working with to redo the legislature. And I've been, on behalf of the Supervisor Association, attending their meetings, which were by Zoom. That committee is going around to all the towns. They've sent out a request for us. And prior to us scheduling the meeting with Marin and your group making the presentation, I had already told them that day. So they're going to come to our workshop meeting. I did tell them max 15 to 20 minutes. They just want to explain the process. What it is a committee of, I think, 7 people that, I think the way it worked is the county exec, all towns were able to submit names, or they did put out a general call. The county executive picked a certain number, and then that group of people picked the remainder members to make it completely fair. Having attended their meetings, and part of the reason I sort of volunteered to do it is back in 2010, I went to every single meeting because I tried to get on that committee, but I couldn't because I was on the county planning board and that made me a county official. But surprise, surprise, my public comment was a map of the redistricting. I presented it to them, and a lot of what I presented ended up in the final version, so.
So you're
it's-
saying that these numbers are for
They
redistricting?
would use the 2020 numbers for the redistricting. And I saw Rob Leibowitz this afternoon, and he said he's looked in a number of the legislative districts. They can be plus or minus 5% of the average number. So basically, they're going to take that number and divide it by, what is it? How many legislators are there? 23. So they're going to divide that number by 23, and that's the target number for every legislative district. They can be plus or minus 5% from that. And they have to draw the lines based around that. And literally, it's like you click on a block, on a census block, and the computer program tells you how many more it adds. And it's frustrating because you'll try one and all of a sudden you'll be 8% over and you take one away and now you're 12% under and you got to just find the right combination. You know me, I'm fascinated by that kind of stuff. So anyway.
It's a number game.
It is.
It's a number
It's
game.
numbers. But anyway, they're coming to talk to us on Thursday, but I wanted to give this to you ahead of time since. it's
Thursday at our workshop.
A week from Thursday.
Yes.
2 weeks from
2
today.
weeks from today.
Thank
2
you.
weeks, thank
They
you.
all
Like,
blend
I am
together.
not
Thank
gonna
you.
come
No.
next Thursday.
Yeah, I'm thinking the same. Nope, nothing there. No.
Any other board members have anything else to bring up tonight? Okay. We have your information and we definitely will be talking about it probably at the workshop meeting. So tonight was more the public hearing.
Oh, no, we came by because in your note that said maybe you guys should come watch how your government functions, so.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
No, we-
Well,
that's why we started
thank
that.
you. Yeah.
Good Charlie Carroll, I love it.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure you weren't expecting us to talk about your application
No,
tonight.
no,
So,
we didn't want to make a noise, so we're sitting
That's
there.
well, thank you. We
Yeah.
appreciate that because I wish more people did that.
Yeah, we've had a couple coming for years and they never say anything, but they always sit here. They love coming every month.
And they got involved because they came to
grandchildren.
ask a question.
Grandchildren.
And
That's why it's
Grandchildren.
interesting to us.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
part of it, grandchildren.
Chris, Aaron, your favorite
Oh,
motion?
motion to adjourn.
There you go.
Unless you want a
Second?
No.
Okay, I'll second.
He
Okay.
has never messed with that
You
procedure.
sat down
Oh.
and then you turned and I was like, hey, who is that?
Yeah.
Just about 10 years old.
That's it. That's it.
Yeah.